Okay, welcome to episode 46. Again, as I mentioned, 4 weeks away from my 50th birthday. For the 50th episode, we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do, something special. Maybe a montage of my life. No. I'm very happy to have Andrew Kim from Share, the founder and CEO, to chat all things investment in the US. So thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me.
As I said, I do not want to steal your thunder. So please tell us exactly what Share does.
Yeah, so Share works with everyday investors to help them find high returning rental homes across landlord friendly states in the US, and then helps build out their portfolio so they can focus on their professional and personal careers. What we say is, we want a 10x their portfolio over the next 10 years. So when you're ready to retire, you have this nest egg that's feeding you.
I'm available. We'll talk about that after. So there were a lot of key points, like words that you used in that I want to kind of pick out for like people who are thinking about investing, who are not necessarily, I want to use this word savvy, but just not like someone who has the experience in it. So one of the things that I said to you, I found most interesting and why I wanted to have you on was people who have thought of investing in real estate are challenged now in the Toronto market and most of the urban markets in Canada only because the days of the 1% interest rates are gone.
Right.
And even more so far gone are the days of cash flow positive properties. I still believe investing in Canada and, smart, it can be done well. And I always say to, those financial advisors, I don't know any stocks that pay me rent. Not to say that you should put all your money into real estate. I'm going to have all the trolls on TikTok saying, yeah. But I think that, so first, the landlord-friendly states I want to delve into because for sure that's definitely a controversy in Toronto
Yes,
or
definitely.
Ontario for sure. And then really when you say like you're a turnkey, so you would go to you guys, you'd say, like you said, I want to invest. I want to put together a real estate portfolio. I think the U.S. is, the way to go. You'll explain to us why. And so you're able to come to the average person and explain why they want to buy it, what the rental rates are, all that stuff, correct?
Yes, correct.
All right, so let's hear about where I'm going to Miami tomorrow. So
Okay.
Miami is definitely not one of them, I'm sure. Maybe the
Florida
states.
is, yes,
Florida,
yeah.
yes, Florida. Yes, no, I've looked into the real estate in Miami. Not cheap. So what are some of those states that you're recommending to clients right now?
Yeah, so we typically refer to them as the Sun Belt states. So think about everything on the bottom southern part of the U.S. from
Okay.
East Coast to West Coast and up the southeast side all the way up to the Carolinas.
Okay.
And then some of the Midwest, let's call Ohio, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee.
So yeah, they really are red states.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they are more landlord friendly. Is that why you're seeing that?
Yeah, they're landlord friendly, and then the price points are way more accessible, right? So we can find a lot of excellent homes that are pretty new. Like, for example, can I use like a local example of like a
Yeah.
Richmond Hill home
Yeah,
for
yeah,
like
yeah.
$350,000? So they're below the national average of a home price in the U.S. And for context,
You can't buy like a parking spot now.
yeah, and for context, like, the average home price in the U.S. was roughly around 375,000 USD. Compared to Canada, where it's like north of 700,000. And if you look at Toronto, then you really know that that's north of $1 million.
Isn't that crazy? And you think about like our tax level and then think about the tax level in the US.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah, and these landlord-friendly states are typically tax-friendly too.
yes, they are. Hence Florida. Okay, so let's talk about basics. So I know how to get a mortgage here in Canada. Is it the same investment wise in the US? Like, do you have to have a certain minimum down payment? What do you have to show? Who do you deal with? Like anyway, I'll let you
Yeah,
take it away.
so, the U.S. single-family rental market first is like a north of a $4 trillion market. It's massive. And 88% of the owners are actually just everyday investors that own less than like 1 to 10 units. So after the
everyday investors, 1 to 10. I own 1 to 10 homes.
yeah, so everyone looks at real estate as sort of the wealth building opportunity, something you build, you buy generational wealth, pass on to your kids, right? So it actually is majority owned by just average individual as opposed to like a large institution like a hedge fund or private equity firm.
That's
right?
very interesting. And in the US, you're saying that. So because we were talking before we started, I mentioned that in Canada pre-COVID or at the beginning of COVID when the interest rates were like money was free, the latest stat was that 1 in 4 homes in, and again, I might be getting this wrong, it may not be all of Canada, but definitely in Toronto and was owned by not a corp, by a corp or someone who already owned a principal home. So it was an investment property. Yeah. You're seeing that same in the US, saturation?
So that's what we would call like the everyday investors. Like it's like people, but they own it under a company, right? Where they own 1 to few units, but they personally own it.
And not just tax reasons,
liability protection.
Right.
And then there's the institution that owns like thousands of homes, right? So this one I'm referring to is sort of everyday investor is sort of the terminology I'll use. So the mom and pop investor.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, so ever since the '08 mortgage crisis, they created what's called a DSCR loan. It's a debt service cover ratio loan. Okay. And I believe the closest thing that Canadians have is a commercial loan where it's, they underwrite the property. Yeah, they underwrite the property.
I think it has to be 5
doors.
Yeah. I think it's a minimum of 5 doors for you to be able to qualify for that.
Yeah, exactly. This is now specific to US single family rental homes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so as long as your rental rate can cover the debt, they'll do like 1 million of these a year for you. And they're typically the same terms, 30-year fixed, with minimal to low prepayment penalties, and you can negotiate that.
So here are some of like really key points about what you said. So first of all, in Canada, we have to remortgage our properties. You can listen, you hear about amortization. Right. That's a whole, okay. So you amortize your property over a certain amount of time every time you renew your mortgage. And that may be when you first get in to extend your payments, make them lower, or try to pay it off, towards the end of it. But you have to renegotiate. Maximum that you can fix, you can lock your mortgage in is 5 years. What's the longest you can lock your mortgage in the US?
Oh, I've seen 30, I've seen 40.
Okay, so I just wanted, I get giddy about this because as someone who owns properties, the luxury of being able to buy something and lock your mortgage in and not think about it and know that your rate is not going to go up and you don't have to worry about it for 30 years. And by the way, I think that's why the U.S. is having such a hard time with inflation compared to us.
Yeah, possibly.
I mean, think about it. Mm-hmm. If you knew that your mortgage payment is not going to change for basically the time you're going to own your home with your family, why would you stop spending? Right. Like our biggest debt ratio is the mortgage. Right. Our mortgage debt in Canada has been one of the most inflationary problems the Bank of Canada's had to undergo. Yeah. And then you go to the U.S. and you're like, 30 years.
Yeah, so it's great too. It's from an investor perspective, right?
Yes, for sure, because then your rents keep going up.
Exactly.
But your mortgage stays. I'll be signing up after this podcast. No. So I think that's also, and then going back to your the bank will do 1 million of those, let's say. So in Canada, traditional banks, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in the sense of loopholes that I'm sure there are, is that you can only have a maximum of 4 mortgages. So I own my home, I'm grateful to own a cottage and a recreational property. If I wanted to buy 3 more properties, I could not. I would only be allowed to, if I was qualified, to have 2 more, right? So in the US,
not a problem. Yeah, your track record at being a good investor probably weighs more than your actual credit. So your credit could there's some nuance, but if you have a good portfolio and say these are my last 5 deals, and they look at it and oh, you're pretty good. They'll be like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's give you 5 more.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's such a good thing either, but there we go.
Yeah, but again, they're minimal personal liabilities, so they look at the house again. So.
No, for sure. I think it's just this is the marked difference between the U.S. and Canada. We live in a socialist country where the government has regulatory control over a lot that we do, whereas the U.S. is very capitalist. even more so when you get into the red states. It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
a free-for-all.
Yeah. So to kind of add on that, you got 30-year fixed, and then you don't have real rent control. So you've got this.
Oh yeah, there's no rent control.
Yeah, you've got this
Sorry.
upward ticking rental increases, right?
It like makes you giddy when you think about it. Okay, so then, all right. Well, I'm listening to this, and I'm like, well, why wouldn't everybody do this, right? So
Yeah.
okay, let's go back. How much do you need to put down percentage wise if you are going to go? Because I mean, 20% of 300,000 is, in relative terms, not that much.
Yeah. So the price. So to context, we have our price range that we typically work with is anywhere from $125,000 a home to $350,000.
125. I swear to God, there are parking spots in Toronto for 125,000. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and there's
that you can mortgage.
Yeah, there's a difference between sort of the 350 and the 150 home.
I'm sure.
So yeah, it depends on what sort of price point, but you can go in as low as 25% for a Canadian, or 30% is typically if you're getting your first home in the U.S. to establish some credit, and then later on you can probably go down lower.
Okay. So relatively similar. It's just that your starting price point for
It's much lower.
Right. So, okay, so a couple of things. So much to talk about. Why single family home? So, I mean, I find, and I've been saying this for a while, affordability, major problem in Canada. I believe, as sad as this is to say out loud, but it's true that we're breeding a generation of renters. On the other hand, I also have to say that maybe Toronto, and I'll just use that as like the jury of one perspective, like it's maybe just coming into its own. I mean, when you think about New York, London, Paris, no one lives in the city. Yeah. Like no one. And because they can't afford it. Right. Okay. So is that what's going to happen in Toronto? Very possibly. How long it will take, I don't know. But I have said to investors who can afford to do it, buy a bungalow before you, like, go and buy a small bungalow in an area where you can still buy, and you can still buy a bungalow for $850, $900. It's not a great school district. It's not it's an up and coming area, but it's still $800, to $900,000 versus buying a condo that you're going to have to deal with maintenance fees that are continually going to go up. And because I think that families, like that demand for family homes is going to exponentially outpace condos.
Yeah, 100%. And like we saw that really coming out during COVID too, right? Especially in the US, where people that were living in like new families living in multi were like, okay, let's go to the suburbs. We need the space. We need some grass in our backyard. We just need space.
Yeah. And I mean, I know, people have moved back and but I believe and have seen that need for space, like I'm still selling homes where people are like, I still need 2 workspaces because either, spouse works from home 1 day a week, 2 days a week, or needs the ability to, or can, or wants to, or whatever that is. So I would agree with you, not to say that condos, they fluctuate more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and then from an investor perspective, the hard cost of maintenance fees, just not being able to control that. And that's just kind of eating into your revenue month over month and year over year. Mm-hmm. And then not being able to raise your rents in proportion.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's talk about the challenges about this because, well, like, let's be really honest. It sounds too good to be true. Like I've got, $50,000. Sounds like I can do a lot with share. I always think investing outside of where you live and like I don't know anything about Arkansas. I don't know anything outside of Miami, Florida, like that type of thing comes with risks. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, do not do it yourself. Do not. But, what does share bring to avoid those risks? Why would I want to put my money with share for that reason?
Yeah, so multiple ways to tackle this. One, we kind of see ourselves as a technology company, and in the US, there's a lot more publicly accessible data on a zip code level.
It's true.
So we tap into a lot of that.
The data is so amazing in the US.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of our capital and our technology to pull things by the zip code. So we can give you sort of household income, unemployment, crime, school, everything, all of that kind of on the zip code level. But on sort of a larger level, we come from, or my head of investments, the guy who looks at every single deal and picks every single market, comes from Starlight Capital, which is one of Canada's largest landlords.
Yes. I had a dear friend, Howie Paskowitz, on here. Yeah. We had to turn the comments off on that one. Ooh, do they love landlords?
Yeah. So
I can't wait for the comments on this one. Yeah.
Well, at least, so he was the executive director on the U.S. Residential side. So hopefully, the Canadians will leave him alone. But they actually
a lovely human. I can speak to him as a human being, but yes.
So they have a few billion of assets in the U.S. as well, across the same region. So he follows the sort of overall state trends of economic growth, population, job growth.
Right. So where you're putting your money into. Yeah. It's not blind. Yeah. Right. I'm not just going on, a Zillow or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with Zillow, but it's on a US real estate site to say, here's what, you can buy. Yeah. You are, I don't want to say an online investor, because I think that comes off as like a robo kind of, which I don't love either. And it's not what you do. So where's the personalized touch, I guess?
Yeah, so we understand the difference between all of the different markets for the types of homes, different types of cities, what to be worried about. So we actually work with each investor and client, like, what's your risk appetite? What are you looking for? And it's like, okay, if you're a safer person, let's go to these 3 metros, as opposed to these other ones. So we do take their lead and get their investment appetite, and actually sort of what's their financial plan for the next 5-10 years.
And are you seeing, again, I guess it's the same rule as like buying stocks or buying real estate anywhere. You're really buying it to hold on. This is not a get rich quick. This is not like, do not call Andrew and say, I want to invest and make 100% overnight. This is about, like, I think you put it perfectly when you started off was, this is my investment goal, and I want to have a nest egg when I retire. And I think that's genius. I always say, there's twofold for investing in single family. One is obviously like what that property is going to exponentially increase to in value, obviously over. And again, that sweet spot is somewhere in the 7 years. Sometimes you can do it in 5, 10 is even better, but the longer you hold on to it, the better. Same with stocks. Just look at the stock market, look at the real estate market, all of that. But it's also the amount of money that you make in your rent that is then paying down whatever mortgage you have. And yes, it's deductible income in your corp, which is, much less. But, and then when you pay it off,
yeah, exactly.
It just keeps turning.
Yeah.
But what happened? So let's play this game. I'm going to buy a single family house in Arkansas. I don't know. And let's do Texas. What's really hot in Texas? Where should I buy in Texas?
Dallas.
My husband really wants to buy
Dallas.
in Texas.
Austin's expensive, but it's a great place. But there's a corridor.
South by Southwest Festival and all that cool stuff. Yeah, it's cool in Austin.
Yeah, there's a corridor between the two that is starting to grow, and Samsung's building like a $7 billion chip factory there. So it's starting to blow up there. Same with Rivian. I think it was Rivian. It was electric vehicle companies.
Oh, okay.
These types of things are constantly happening in Texas.
Well, they have the space also. It's such a huge state, right?
So, Dallas, Fort Worth area, that whole area, Austin corridor, San Antonio, and pockets of Houston.
And traditionally, I've seen in this world so many things I never thought I would see, but the chances of Texas ever flipping to be a blue state are like less than 0.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the Cowboys would do. So I lost my train of thought. So I'm buying in Dallas, and the furnace goes. Or am I talking to the tenants? Am I dealing with how am I collecting rent? How am I, there's a flood in the basement, like all that stuff. Yeah, just the logistical risks around that.
Yeah, so we will handle all of that. We'll sort of set a dollar amount threshold where you dictate to us. So you say, okay, Andrew, you deal with everything under $1,000, but everything above $1,000, I want to be notified. Or
Oh, I see. Okay. So if they're just like, yeah, the faucet needs replacing, you did it and you send me the bill.
Yeah, so we'll handle all that invoicing. So you log into our account, everything's kind of reconciled, so it's all clean. But there is a property management company there. We're working directly with them. So the average relationship is where the client doesn't actually ever talk to us, and we've got permission to go up to like $5,000 worth of spending. But
You still get notified. Like,
You
so
get
let's say
notified,
I'm
yes.
just too busy. It's fine. I understand.
Yeah.
All good. Furnace breaks, like whatever. But you're still going to be like, by the way,
Yes.
we're going to install X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. Okay,
and
okay,
then,
okay.
Yeah, and we know how to play the game really well, so we'll be like, okay, well, that could be done on this insurance policy, or maybe we kick this down the road for the next rainstorm to fix the roof, or so we know how to keep the property manager at bay, because they typically, depending on your property management partner, they could just want patch it with the most expensive solution, whereas we want to sort of stretch that out.
So that's interesting. So I misunderstood it. So you're not dealing with the property manager, you're dealing with the investment side of it, and you're representing the investor with the property management. So what would you say typically property managers charge in the US?
Yeah. So to our role, we call ourselves the asset manager. So we're acting like you, but saving you the time. The property management companies in the US typically charge around 9 to 10% of monthly rent.
Okay.
But they're, and kind of to the beauty of large companies buying up all these homes, there's large property management companies that only service like large institutions.
Yeah. Here too.
And then specialize in single family. But because they look at us as an institution, we get to use them, get their discounts, pass it through to our clients.
That's huge, by the way. Because finding property managers that want to deal with that person that has like 2 or 3 properties is next to impossible. Right. Like even in Canada, I think like there's some realtors that are trying to do it just to figure out how to get business. I'm like, I don't know how they have time. But
So that's actually the typical way of a client finding a real estate investment is like an agent that has some client portfolio say, I'll manage it for you. So we've signed large contracts with large property management company. Like I think our smallest one has around 3,000 doors in a particular couple metro. And so we average anywhere between 5 and 7%. Right now it's about 5.7% of monthly rent.
Okay, but let's even say, I would say, listen, what on a $350,000 house in Dallas, I mean, I won't hold you to it, but can you throw out a range of what like rent is for that?
Yeah, anywhere between $2,500 to $3,000.
Right, so you're paying $300 a month, right? I mean, really, it's quite reasonable considering they're on 24-hour call for these tenants. And then what do you charge as a company from a fee standpoint?
Yeah, so we have what we call an asset management fee. It's anywhere from 0.25% to 1% of the house price annually. Okay. So as the portfolio gets bigger, that gets smaller. Okay. But we know that through the discount of the property management fee that we've pre-negotiated, and same with our landlord insurance, you're pretty much covering our cost.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to be skeptical about it, but I mean, it's really a really turnkey way for someone who wants to get into an investment that is, delivering on cash flow. Like, what would you say percentage-wise the portfolios that you manage are cash flow positive?
Like 99%. The only ones that are negative.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, only there's the 1 or 2 odd client that doesn't mind the cash flow negative scenario. Right. Only because it's very short-lived and they know that it's hard to get it's hard to buy rental properties in the US right now because there's so much competition. Like we're still getting outbid. Even like the last 2 years outbid, still highly competitive, and it's always like the Starlight equivalent bidding against us.
Wow. Yeah, and you threw out what was the percentage of homes being owned by corporations by the year 2030, you said?
Yeah, over 30%. Right now it's at 4%. In 2008 it was 0.
It's only 4%?
Yeah, and that's over $100 billion since 2008.
Only 4%. So again, it's 25% here, which I find fascinating considering how much easier it is to buy there.
Yeah, if you look at the multifamily, that's north of 40 to 50%. Yeah. But But single family homes, it's much lower. But like in certain pockets, it's pretty aggressive. Like in Atlanta, 1/3 of homes are owned by like a large
One
entity.
third.
Yeah, single detached.
I've been to Atlanta, home of Coca-Cola.
Yes, home to a lot of Fortune 500 companies. Yeah.
Interesting. Who would you say is the biggest Fortune 500 company in the U.S. buying up homes right now?
Well, I would say it's the largest. There's like those real estate investment trusts and private equity firms. Invitation Homes, it's called. And there was actually a Canadian one called Tricon. They're one of the largest, and they were just bought by Blackstone, which everyone knows Blackstone.
Yes, everyone knows Blackstone.
So Canadian's largest institution that was buying U.S. single family homes was just sold to Blackstone.
I think I read about that.
Yeah, it's big. It was like a few weeks ago.
Well, before Andrew's company is bought,
Yeah.
we will put his contact information in the show notes. And I definitely want to hear more about it. I think it's an incredible opportunity for people who are looking for real estate, or even if you have Canadian, you were saying also that you used to be 80-20, so 80% US investors, 20% Canadian, and now you're starting.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more Canadian investors.
I'm not shocked at all. Not shocked at all.
Yeah, it's typically like we're seeing a lot of our clients coming from the major metros like New York, LA, San Francisco, and now Toronto, right?
Yeah.
So
they're for sure, because investors are just, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And also because of the residential tenancy.
Yeah.
It's making I would say that's probably, not to say the tenants, everyone deserves rights, all of that stuff, but it's making it harder and harder for anybody to even break even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I learned a lot. It's amazing. Thank you.